modern business landscape presents very unique, renewing challenges for CEOs today. CEOs are accountable for a much wider range of stakeholders. It includes employees, includes customers, suppliers, communities, all sorts of variation. You have to be much more.
Are you leading a legacy organization through a complete transformation, or you're a CEO who must balance innovation, culture, and strategy to survive? Well, that's exactly what Anthony Maiello has done. With over 40 years of leadership at global powerhouses like GE and Reuters, Anthony now serves as the CEO of StratifyPro, where he helps organizations bridge the gap between strategy and execution. So in this episode, he reveals what most leaders get wrong about change, why culture and not technology is your biggest barrier, and how to turn resistance into results. So if you're ready to uncover the real keys to driving transformation, scaling success, this is the conversation that you need to hear. What do you think are the key lessons corporate can learn from startups?
If you're a leader in a startup and you're trying to gain traction, this early traction really depends on, I'm the founder, my ability to sell. I have a team, yes, but this is really my baby. And if I can't sell it, nobody can.
To stop a second on this, such a great lesson. I want to make sure the audience doesn't losing.
Don't be one of those people that say, do not do that, that won't work.
In the last 5 minutes, you gave a fantastic recipe for all those people that are facing the challenge of leading, and also those people that are leading and operating in different countries, which is essentially everybody.
If I had to summarize this, it's basically...
Hi everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of The World Class Leaders. Today, I'm excited to have Anthony Maiello. So he's a seasoned technology executive with over 40 years of experience leading organizations across various industries. And he has held top leadership CTO and CIO roles at renewed companies such as General Electric, Reuters, and DXC Technology. And currently, he serves as the CEO of StratifyPro. He will tell us more about that. Anthony expertise span from startups to large-scale enterprises, demonstrating really his ability to navigate complex organizational landscape, and we'll talk about this today. And again, his experience includes leading technology initiatives, driving growth, and delivering innovative solutions. So Anthony is also a distinguished recipient of the prestigious Edison Award, a testament to his innovative contributions during his time at GE. He holds bachelor's and master's degree in computer science and mathematics from Manhattan University. So, Anthony, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Amazing. And you were just sharing, before we were hit record, you're probably jet lagging a little bit because you were in New York. So we'll try to make it as exciting as possible so you can be, in a conversation with me today. So I want to start with a question asked to everyone, Anthony. And for you, I'm sure, I wouldn't say it's an easy answer, but that's certainly in your play field. So what does it truly mean to be a CEO in 2025, given where we are heading to? So what aspect of this role do people really often misunderstand or actually overlook?
Yeah. So while the core responsibilities of CEO has always been really demanding, so we're not trying to reinvent the role per se here, but things like strategy, financial planning, risk management, crisis management, it's really always been at the core of what any good CEO needs to deal with. I think the focus, though, on a traditional CEO in years past, as we all know, has always really emphasized financials as a priority. And really, this continues to be important. But the modern business landscape, as we all know, presents very unique and always renewing challenges for CEOs today. CEOs today need to grapple with a whole bunch of things that I don't think existed in my 40-year career until maybe the last 5 years or so, especially. And, something we don't think about often, things like that I see all the time, is really a much broader stakeholder focus. You're not just looking at one type of stakeholder anymore. CEOs are accountable for a much wider range of stakeholders that includes employees, includes customers, suppliers, communities, all sorts of variation. You have to be much more aware. So your approach needs to balance the interests of very diverse and various stakeholder values. And this requires significantly more stronger leadership and effective communication skills. And one last thing around that, and I know there's a lot of changes, but let me, of course, mention the changing technological landscape. I think, we all know the business world is much more dynamic. Technology advances are all over, much more frequent. Digital technologies are basically reshaping our industries, customer expectations every day. So if I had to summarize this, it's basically you need to add more emphasis in the CEO world today on digital and strategy-led leadership. And the reason I say that CEOs have to be much more driven towards understanding, not only knowing about, but understanding digital transformation. Like CTOs and CIOs need to understand more about the business these days. CEOs need to understand more about technology and leveraging data-driven insights like AI, automation. You need to improve efficiency at what you do already, but really always be open-minded to creating new business models and things like that. So I think there's much more emphasis on that sort of thing. There's always emphasis on profit maximization, and that will always be important, but involving and integrating more different kinds of goals from different kinds of focus areas is really why strategy and why I'm in the business that I'm in today. Strategic planning and execution have become even more important. If you don't do it, you're out of business as a CEO.
Makes totally sense. And my takeaway from, your first point is really about creating a stronger integration between leadership and technology, and that encompasses strategy, execution. But there needs to be a stronger, and unified understanding about how these two things come together and play together. So I think it's such a great point to introduce the next question I have for you, which is, given your profile, your experience, is a question I had in mind already, when we first met was, okay, what can we really learn from your experience at GE, especially when it comes to transitioning from a traditional organization to a software-driven focused company, which was really the goal of Jeff Immelt, which you have worked with, closely. So tell us a little bit more about, what were the biggest challenges and successes in, that you experienced in leading such a dinosaur, monumental transformation, and how those lessons really shape your leadership idea, philosophy.
Without a doubt, this was not only one of the most challenging leadership roles I had in my career, but definitely the most opportunity to learn. Was a monumental undertaking. GE, as you said, dinosaur at the time. I joined in very early 2000s, and the company was basically an industrial company, not really software focused. So I was fortunate enough to be at the forefront of this change. I came into the company starting with my role on what we were calling the smart grid or the intelligent grid at GE Energy. At that time, the electric grid was predominantly hardware-based at GE everywhere. I mean, the electric grid's the electric grid. At GE, again, an industrial giant, deeply rooted in hardware manufacturing and sales. It wasn't just technology. It was profits, losses, sales. All of these teams were deeply rooted in how they operated and how they developed things and so forth. Most of the engineers, when you talk to them, deeply rooted in developing hardware. Things like transformers, switches, capacitors, meters, these were commodities. So when they built these things, they worried about making sure that 5 cents or 1 penny was a big difference in a sale. So these devices needed to be managed, so there were some software there, so that GE wasn't completely alien to software. Now, to create the smart grid, we needed advanced software logic in every part of the system, and not only asset management, automatic meter reading, but even just for one example, the complexity of transmitting electricity and distributing electricity was one way. We needed it to be two-way. We needed to integrate renewables. We needed to get, when a home was generating electricity, we wanted to sell it back to utilities. There were things today that we kind of do were not there back then. So shifting the company's focus towards software presented significant challenges. And things like cultural barriers. We needed to invest in talent acquisition. We needed to develop innovative software solutions to do that. And to navigate this complexity, we needed to change our strategic approach. And we needed to work really very, very closely with the culture of the company. Because I will tell you, just skipping to the end of this, the biggest lesson learned here is do not underemphasize the importance of a culture, because this was our biggest barrier. Technology, we can fix. We made some acquisitions. We brought in some great software people. We were, strategically speaking, we can accomplish our outcomes. But what we were hitting barriers on was the culture and the resistance to change. And this required a much slower, small win type of process. So we changed our strategic approach to, hey, let's get some small wins here. Let's win some credibility with some of these hardcore engineers that didn't think this was the right approach. Now, I will tell you, when I first started, everybody was against this. And there were very few people that wanted to do it other than the very executive leaders who saw some emphasis here. But I will tell you, at the end of 10 years later, there were very few people who didn't think we needed to do this. So that was a worthwhile exercise. But in order to get there, the experiences there shaped my leadership philosophy forever. This is why I always tell people doing this at GE really shaped the way I lead now, emphasizing the power of innovation, the importance of confidence and determination, the importance of collaboration, the need for strong results-oriented culture, and really to focus on executing on strategic outcomes and staying laser focused on that. You notice I didn't say anything about technology. That was kind of the easy part to do that. At the end of the day, the big lesson learned there, if you're going to be a leader for something this monumental, which was huge, you need to have adaptability and resilience. And what I used to call it with my team back then, and I still use this term, it's thick skin. And everybody's trying to knock you down. So you need to really stay focused, believe in what you're doing, and challenge. Could always be open to challenge and be able to take the shots when they come and continue to move forward. It's pretty unbelievable how that all worked out. But today it almost is laughable because GE's changed so much, and all for the better. And now software is ingrained in the philosophy of GE more than anything. At this point, I'm happy to see.
Yeah, and we can definitely all see that. So I'm curious about, first of all, an observation. So it's so interesting that all I'm not saying 70, 80, or 90%, all the CEOs that came here on the show, and in every occasion that we discuss about change and transformation, he ended up to be culture. All of them. There's not even one that said, no, it was more about technology, and, everybody said about culture. So I'm curious, if we stay a little bit inside of this conversation, is, you essentially described a different outcome after once you have been able together, to create something different. So technology and the transformation was essentially possible and effective. What is maybe one thing that you can share that either Jeff or your team, so whoever in GE was able to shape to start making that change in the culture? What is one thing, if you remember, I know it's been many years ago, but that you, in your opinion, has really moved the dial? Something that started to shift, was a communication, was a decision, was a meeting, maybe it was a strategy, maybe it was a process. So is there something that you can share? Maybe you can't, I don't know.
I can share. One thing I'll caution you on that, it was a combination of a lot of things. But I will say there was the biggest thing for me, again, it wasn't technology, but building credibility with the old-time engineers, the guys that have been there for 20, 30 years, building these systems. Do not, as a leader, it's very easy to make the mistake of saying that's not the way we do it in the future. It's all about software. We did not do that. I didn't do that. I'm an electrical engineer in my first job. It was one of my first jobs. I kind of get it. And it's very important, but don't underemphasize the complexity of their work and the importance of their work, and try to build credibility by getting small wins, and not try to replace everything all at once. And the other thing is, I'll kind of say a two-way street here. I say, hey, technology wasn't the hardest part, and it was not. But don't think as a CEO you go into this not understanding the complexity of the technology. You don't have to be a technical genius, but don't underplay it. Don't be financially driven only, and understand the complexities of what it takes not only to build what these guys were doing already, but in order to transform from where they are to where we need to be in the future. This requires hand-holding, empathy, all sorts of things. So that's what the most important thing to me is. Include them. The other thing, and I know you said one thing, but it's all about collaboration. Maybe there's a better way to say it. You need to make sure everybody has a say. These are very intelligent people.
Yes.
They built what they have today, and a lot of them evolved. I will say there were a handful that did not, but a lot of these guys did evolve, and they did understand the importance because we included them in decision making. We didn't exclude them and say, hey, a bunch of young software guys are going to come in and replace you. That's not what we did. In fact, we couldn't do it that way. We needed their knowledge. We needed their experience of how the system worked. So that's it. Keep them included in all the decisions.
Yeah, and to me, that is such a powerful reminder for every leader that if you really want to shape culture and shaping the future organization, it is not one-way direction and directing, and giving instructions, but more getting people involved in a co-creation of what you're doing, which will end up to have much more people enrolled in the process rather than against the process. So, by the way, what you shared earlier, you said most of people were resistant, and then 10 years later, only a few people resistant. I think it's a great testament how you've been able to shape people's mindset, first of all, about their contribution, but without discounting their own personal expertise and skills, which it sounds like what you really did. So impressive. Anthony, you mentioned, before I ask you the follow-up question, you mentioned about how that experience really shaped your leadership style, etc. It also, you and I shared a very similar experience. By the way, it's not just you and me in the war, but at least in this conversation, it's 100% of people involved. So you and me. And you said that, on the offline, we discussed about it. And you have always primarily led teams and people that were way younger than you. And that's one element, which I think is important. It's very consistent with my personal experience. I was a young leader, really a young age. And then I always worked with people that were 20 years older than me, and that comes with all challenges, about confidence, about leadership, etc. But also adding a little more complexity to your leadership journey. You are an American, and you work a lot in the UK, so you need also to adapt to different cultures. So how have you really adjusted, your leadership approach to be an effective leader in the conditions there, again, at least they were for me, they were difficult, challenging, complex, just for what I just shared?
I mean, one of the things I'll reference is my experience at Reuters, where it was really my first leadership role way back in the 90s. But it was, I was in my young 20s then, and I was always a change agent. So when I went into Reuters as a young engineer, I saw how they were doing some development work in what we used to call real-time news, which was getting news out to our customers very quickly. We didn't have the internet per se back then like it is today, so we had our own network and that sort of thing. So I had come up with a brand new idea, and I was challenging the way we were doing it. My boss at the time said, hey, go present this to a couple of people even higher level than him out in the UK, and I did do that. And after a few months, they promoted me to a leader. I forget my title. It was some sort of manager. Eventually, I became a vice president at Reuters. But I was in charge of 10 people, and I was in my low 20s, and most of the people on those teams, everybody was older. A couple people were 2-3 times my age, so almost. And it was somewhat of a challenge when it came to that. Really, again, I go back to how do you lead things like that? It's really active listening, empathy, and cultural sensitivity as well. Getting to the culture side, it's crucial to adapt communication styles to different cultures and nuances. And I include this with age too. It isn't just about different countries. it's also, different age groups behave a little differently. So empathy, listening, taking their inputs, cultural sensitivity is hugely important. One thing I do want to emphasize on culture that I learned over time, and you don't realize it, is there are cultural nuances even within a country. And, you see that in countries like India,
Yes.
every country. And you certainly see that in the United States. I've lived in a few different states, quite a few different states, and I live in Texas now, and I come from New York. I will tell you there's huge cultural differences between the two states, and it goes well beyond politics. I'm talking just the way people operate and behave and family values, all that stuff. You need to understand that, and you can't underestimate the power of that. So always know your audience, so to speak, there, adapt to the communication styles that you're looking to work with there. And sometimes you need to combine them. And really, by understanding and respecting individual differences, for me, I've been able to build strong relationships. I've created my style is very inclusive work environments. I don't alienate anybody. Of course, it's important to make executive decisions when necessary, but I very rarely, if ever, alienate anybody in a work environment. One of as I said, my earliest leadership roles at Reuters involved leading experienced professionals. And again, the way I approached that challenge with the older generation at that time was humility and a willingness to learn. And again, that listening, attentivity, really valuing their insights, fostering that collaborative atmosphere, I was able to gain their respect and trust. I actually turned some of those guys into mentors of mine, the mentors to me.
Oh, wow.
So mentorship and coaching have been instrumental to my leadership journey. I absorbed a lot of what they had to tell me and learn. So it was kind of a two-way street there. And, again, providing guidance, support, two-way street. I empowered the team members to do a lot of things to reach their fullest potential, even though they may have been in their 50s and higher there, they had more to go. And they started realizing that and got real excited. And we were socially friends. We did a lot of things together. We were a real team. So that's kind of like a lot of humility when you're dealing with people that are older than you. And don't be one of those people that say, move out of my way, you're too old, and let the young guys do the work now. Do not do that. That won't work. And I will tell you, inclusive, collaborative atmosphere is what you need.
Yeah, or don't do the other kind of a guy that, put the title, or the status in front of everything else. Because that was one of my biggest learning on leading, older people, because at least in the first months, I still remember that months, it was a failing, from a leadership standpoint. It was my failure at that time, because I thought the only way for them to listen to me, given that I'm so much older, is I have to put the status and the title in front of them. So I will gain confidence, I will gain respect, etc. Didn't work. What worked for me was exactly what you said before, was all about humility. So when I started to change that and be, first of all, myself, so stay true to yourself with all your weaknesses, of things that you don't know, and be open and transparent about what you don't know, I think to me made a huge difference, which it sounds like what you did too when you presented humility. And I really love what you said in terms of turning team members into mentors to you, rather the other way around, which is a normal expectation when your boss is older than you. You want to be mentored and coached by your boss, but that doesn't stop to be, on the other way around, which is really the upside pyramid of leadership. Love it. I think it's such a fantastic. By the way, in the last 5 minutes, you gave a fantastic recipe for all those people that are facing the challenge of leading in an older environment, and also those people that are leading and operating in different countries, which is essentially everybody right now. Because, as you said before, inside of every single country are different cultures, and sometimes inside of even of the organization there are different microcultures, right? Fast forward, Anthony, you've been an incredible successful leader in corporate, and we just discussed about that. It was really fascinating. And then, as many, you're not the first, you're not the last. As many, you transition from corporate leadership to a more active environment, let's put it in that way, although I think it's just a stereotype, of course. Move more into the startups environment, founding and scaling startups. And that's what you're focusing right now. We'll get back to it. What do you think are the key lessons corporate can learn from startups and vice versa? Because, we always think about corporate leaders bring their lessons in startup, but also the other way around. There are a lot of corporates that want to actually operate like startups, but they struggle with. So I know it could take, the entire episode just to discuss about that. But what are some key, lessons that you would like to share about that?
Yeah. So transitioning from corporate leadership to entrepreneurship and the other way for me, I went back and forth a few times, has been really transformation within myself, right? And really transformative kind of experience here. I think when you're in a startup, you wear many hats. We all know that. I mean, you're going to go into a startup, you call yourself a CEO and all you want there, but you're everything. You're the operator, you're managing things and so forth. So from day one, when you're in a startup, you really need to try to surround yourself with experienced mentors, build a strong team. It's crucial for traction, scaling, eventual success. You're really, I say to my board right now and the company I'm with now, you don't have a company until you start hiring people. You're still a startup until you start hiring people and you're able to sustain that. So as a startup grows into a company, as a leader, if you're going to really transform, if you come from that corporate world, it's really essential to understand how to balance things. And when you need to balance the agility and risk-taking mindset that you have in a startup with the strategic planning and resource management and those sorts of things that you need to know as you're growing into a mid-market or larger corporation. So as a company grows, it's important. You have to understand you need to let go of things. You need to delegate tasks. You need to trust your team. And you need to focus a lot more on strategic leadership kind of thing. So as we all know, in the early stages of the startup, a founder plays a pivotal role in everything from product development to sales, right? It's essential to be hands-on. One thing I will say in a startup, if you're a leader in a startup and you're trying to gain traction, you quickly learn this thing. And I kind of recently learned this a few years ago in my third startup, which is what I did with StratifyPro. Is this early traction really depends on I'm the founder, my ability to sell. I'm not a natural salesperson. I am an engineer and a CTO, CEO, but that doesn't mean I can sell things. I really had to learn how to sell because I started realizing, hey, I have a team, yes, but this is really my baby. And if I can't sell it, nobody can. So you have to realize as a big corporate leader with all these admins and all this luxury you had at the corporate level and all the tools and people and, things that you can get done fairly quickly. I know people say corporations don't move fast, but they really do if you're leading them right. Exactly. You need to realize this is all you know. Yes. And you need to go make those first few sales. So you need to understand that you need to be the salesperson for at least the first 2 or 3 deals. It needs to be your network and that sort of thing. And I think that's what's really a big lesson learned when you're a big leader coming into the role of a startup. The other way around is
sorry, Anthony, just to stop a second on this before we look at the other way around. I think what you just shared to me is, and I come from corporate, and then I moved to entrepreneurship. And I'm a little bit different because although I have a kind of technical background, but the reality I've been in commercial roles in a corporate, so that really helped me. I understand that. But really what you said to me is something I really want to underscore because many people move into an entrepreneurial journey without understanding that, the principles how engaging people and sales is engaging people in what your value. So it's such a great lesson. So I just want to underscore it because to me, it's really pivotal, and I want to make sure that the audience doesn't losing in all the great things that you are sharing. Great. So let's see the other way around.
Yeah, that's a very important distinction there. You really need to get, I hate to say it, but you get used to your Ivy Tower kind of world as a C-level in a large corporation, and you don't have that in a smaller corporation. And you really need to really know your product and you're the only salesperson. So that's important. Yeah, going the other way around is really a unique challenge as well, because now you're going back into a role where you need to please shareholders, perhaps, if it's a public company. And the way you communicate and the way you work at that level is very different than when you're scaling or trying to scale an entrepreneurial effort. So you need to realize that hey, I'm moving from a guy that's doing everything and maybe involved in every decision into another world where I'm already at a point where I need to have my team understand. They need to trust me, but it's a two-way street. I have to trust them. What I often say is I need to trust them enough so that I know they're doing the right thing even when I'm not looking. And that's important as an executive in a larger corporation, because you aren't included in every decision. And if you are, you're micromanaging. So it's a very different type of leadership, very different type of relationship with your teams. And it's something an entrepreneur does wrong too sometimes, is they can't get into that mode as the company scales. So when you get to that real company and you're hiring people and you're moving from startup to a mid-level company, you need to start realizing the similar things, that as you hire people, you're hiring them because they might be a little better at it than you at that particular thing that you're hiring them for. And you need to trust that they're making the right decisions even when they're not looking. And that becomes a very difficult thing for a founder to do. And I see a lot of people fail in that respect.
Let me, understand a little bit more about the scaling element, because, you're right. There is an element of hiring the right team, the right people. So let's move back a little more into, scale up organization, but also, organizations, they are already consider corporate, they want to scale, they're growing. And we see every single time, I'm thinking about NVIDIA, but so many other companies, they're really doing that. So, of course, having the right people and trust them and let them do the work is critical. I mean, to me, any CEO, if he has one thing that really needs to do great, is choose the right people, to be surrounded by. However, what are some other lessons, given that you have scaled companies across various industries and really multiply exponentially revenues? I'm sure 90%, if not more, of the people in the audience today either are founders, CEOs, or the traditional CEOs. They're thinking, how can I grow my company? How can I scaling the good thing that we are doing? There are, besides talent, other few lessons that you would like to share in terms of how to scale a company.
I'll give you an example of a company that I entered as a smaller type company that we needed to scale. I worked at a company called Sterling. They hired me as their CIO a few years back. And this is where I needed to lead a significant transformation. The company was a 20-year-old company at the time, but it was led by the founder and, was in a typical struggle trying to break a $40 million barrier and increase their revenue while improving EBITDA or end margin. And they were stuck. It was a SaaS company, and it still is. And they had a strategy. They were recently private equity invested, and their private equity wanted to, of course, go public or IPO within the decade, 5 to 10 years. So they brought in some leadership that has been around the block, and I was the CIO coming into the company. So the technology wasn't able to scale. Every time they added additional revenue, the technology was increasing costs. So it was messing up with the EBITDA, but although the revenue went up, the margin went down. So we needed to innovate. We needed to bring in some higher end software. But how do you do that? How do you do that in a few years and so forth? So to achieve that kind of growth, we implemented a strategic plan that involved four very important pieces. We knew we needed to make acquisitions. We're not going to do this quickly by building all the software on our own. We did also need to organically grow because, if we're going to go public or be sold to a larger private equity, we needed to make sure we owned our own, we built our own technology as well. We needed to, in order to do that, architecture changes, and we needed a lot of talent. We didn't have the talent to do these kinds of things, not just technology talent, but even selling and marketing and so forth.
Right.
So and I'll fast forward a few years by focusing on these key elements. Really, some of the hardest work I've ever done in my life was involved here. That's another story for another time. But focusing on those key elements, we were able to quadruple and more our revenue. We improved the EBITDA. There was a lot of acquisitions going on there to do that, just FYI. Ultimately, this led to a successful acquisition by a larger private equity firm in under 4 years. And then Sterling went on to go public a few years after that and establish over $1 billion in annual revenue over a few years. I'll tell you one more thing. I could bring in some of my experiences at Sabre, which was similar, but let me fast forward because of the sake of time here. The key elements in scaling a business is really, make sure you've got a clear vision. If you're going to transform an organization, it's like this conversation we had earlier. It's more than just technology. You need to have a clear vision. You need to articulate that vision. You need to have a talented team. And I'm not just talking about technology. You need to really have a talented team. Even HR, everybody needs to be pulling a fantastic set of goals forward. You need to be customer centric. This is something people don't realize. You get so internally focused when you go through a transformation because you've got so many process and tools and people doing all these things. You need to make sure you're staying customer focused on everything. And this is true for all the time. So make sure you're customer centric. Make sure you've got sound financial management. If you don't understand your financials, how you're spending your money and what you're doing, you're going to crash and burn. Leverage technology. Don't be afraid of technology. Don't be afraid of AI. Don't be afraid of shortcutting the system. You don't have to build everything. Really make those make-buy decisions well. Get an agile operation. And I don't mean, stay away from, if you need to hire a team to manage a process, you've overprocessed. Don't do that, but become agile. And that means a lot of things. It's not hard to do that, guys. Scrum, become agile. Risk management, know your risks. Always know your risks. Know what you're heading towards. Don't be afraid of SWOT and Pastel type analysis in there. Become very strategically focused. And lastly, strong leadership. This is your company. Don't be afraid to make changes if you have to, but don't underestimate the value of the leaders you already have there. You'll be surprised when you give people the right platform and the right motivation on what they can do. And especially if they know the business and know the product very well. You need very sound strategic planning and strong execution. And get into the rigor of annual and quarterly reviews when it comes to strategy. In order to really scale these days, you really need to be a strategy-led type leader. And we can get more into that maybe in another time. But strategy-led leadership is very important because without that, you're going to not be able to bring your company into the next generation.
Yeah, and you are very strong on this point. You have your own idea and thinking, experience and framework about the integration of strategy and leadership, which to me is critical because I seen the same thing. Like most of the time, leadership is considered like an HR thing or like the soft thing, but very few leaders really think about strategy and leadership as one single thing. I'm conscious about the time because we are not too far from the end of the episode, but would you like to share maybe very high level helicopter view about what is your framework about strategy and leadership? There is something that you would like to share.
I'm a minute here to do this. I was recently working with a CEO on this exact subject. I don't think a lot of CEOs realize how important strategic type leadership is. They're not making mistakes. I just don't think they realize how important. They often lose focus on that because they're putting out fires. So, I'll give you an example. I was just working with a CEO, a growing mid-sized company. I'm not going to share the name at this point because we're still working with this company. And they had a vision to go beyond $5 million in annual revenue. This company, before I got involved, spent hours, countless hours, weeks, crafting a beautiful business plan. They outlined their mission, vision, goals. They did a good job on it, actually. It was kind of flawless. It looked pretty good. Now, although they had all that, the teams veered off course over the course of 2024. Marketing campaigns missed their targets. You look at all the afterward effects here. Product launches delayed, sales numbers fell short, all these things. And the root cause really was a lack of effort. These guys working their butts off. It was a systematic disconnect between strategy and execution, a lack of focus on outcomes. Very simple to say, very hard to do, and stick with the plan. So this CEO, like many others, they got caught in the trap of what I call tactical firefighting. They were focused on putting out fires, meeting immediate deadlines, keeping food on the table, that they lost sight of the bigger picture. They loved the bigger picture, but they couldn't do it. So the strategic plan, once this beacon of hope, so to speak, became really a dusty document on the shelf. Like I say, 90% of my customers come to me like this, so it's not weird. This is a story that plays out countless times, right? And especially these days, as we're moving much faster, things are happening, like we said earlier. Well-intentioned leaders create these ambitious plans, but they lack the clarity, they lack the alignment, accountability, and it hinders their process. So to break that cycle, you have to embrace a structured approach to strategy executions, setting clear goals, tracking progress, fostering a culture of continuous improvement. You can enable your business to move forward. I know that's easier said than done. Over the years, I kind of invented a process that I call Think, Plan, Go. It's a methodology that's ingrained in our product, our StratifyPro product. I won't get into the details. You can go on our website and download documentation for free on how this all works. But it basically helps customers work through that, and not only work through that, but make sure that they're always strategic thinking, always executing on strategy, and always focused on delivering on outcomes, not just actions and projects. And it keeps you focused on that. There's methodologies and process and tools involved in that. It's not just consulting, there's software that we provide as well to keep you organized and that sort of thing. So I encourage you to take a look at that. But that's the important thing, is really sticking with your execution and focusing on, you could do both. You can put out fires, you can execute on your projects, and you could also stay focused on your outcomes.
Wonderful. And I think the gap that you see in strategy execution is a gap that I see so often, and I hear so often CEOs complaining about their inability to mobilize people towards execution. And so there is a lot to say. We had on the show a friend, a fantastic guy, Monte Pedersen, that we all discuss about strategy execution, because that is a gap. That is a niche that many CEOs they're facing. And I think you are really operating, in the middle of a core problem in organization that want to scale. Anthony, that was a fantastic conversation. So where people should go, you mentioned about your website, StratifyPro.com. We'll put on the show notes. But in 30 seconds, would you like to share what StratifyPro does, and so people can understand whether or not, they want to reach out to you?
Yeah, in fact, what you just said is what StratifyPro does. We combined, one thing we did, we realized we built software. We have a great platform. You can subscribe to the platform and start building your strategic plans and doing everything we just said. Stay focused on outcomes and be happy. But we realized over time that what companies really need is a combination of good coaching, consulting, and good process and tools. And we've combined all that. So that's kind of the unique thing of our organizations. We give you that ecosystem, and we work with you, and we guarantee results. You'll see results in 30 days. You'll see better results in 60 days, 90 days, and so on. And it'll shift your culture slowly to always thinking about strategy and making sure you're organized and you stay focused on strategic outcomes. We help you deliver outcomes, and we guarantee it too, which is another very unique thing that we do in our company. It's very important that companies realize. One last thing I'll say here is, I was around during the ERP introduction, and I'm saying that only because ERP in those days in the 70s was a little before my time, but certainly in the 80s and 90s, we saw ERP really not only become a tool and a system that companies needed to do their financials, but became an ecosystem. Companies can't do without ERP now. ERP is a fabric of their life. If you don't have an ERP system in your mid-level company or larger company, you're out of business. I think strategy and strategic planning and execution and focusing on outcomes will evolve into that as well. If you don't do it now, you will be forced to do it. And this will go kind of the way the ERP went, which becomes just as important. Strategy, things are moving fast. You need to do this. And this is partly why I built this system. I took 40 years of my knowledge with my partners, and we really infused that in this think, plan, go methodology that's now ingrained in the platform. And we've seen nothing but successes so far, which is rare. 70% of strategies still fail in this world. So we're hoping to change that a bit.
Wonderful. Well, that's such a very good message to end this episode. That was really insightful. And by the way, your story, your experience, I think it speaks highly about your ability to deliver what you just said. So congratulations, Anthony. So thank you so much for being on the show. It's been an amazing conversation.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for the opportunity. Have a great day.